We have been talking about the three categories of mitzvot. Edut, hukim, mishpatim. Testimonial laws, we spoke in great detail last week about testimonial laws in a nutshell, that which you are giving testimony by doing this ritual. So Shabbat, anything that you do on Shabbat to mark the Shabbat is testimony. Testimony that God created the world in 6 days and rested on the seventh day. Passover, it's testimony that God took us out of Egypt. So any of the rituals that we are given in the Torah that reminds us of an event, of something that God wants us to dwell on and think about, is under the category of mitzvot called Edut, testimonial laws. We then started speaking last week about mishpatim, the civil laws. Civil laws means that which governs behavior between man and man, how we function together as a society. All of that law is under the category called mishpatim, the civil laws. The civil laws are introduced to us in the Torah, in the book of Exodus, in the portion actually called mishpatim. It's called the portion of the civil laws. And it immediately follows the portion of Yisro. Yisro is the portion, where right now in the weekly portions, we're in the portion of Bo right now. The Exodus from Egypt takes place in this week's portion. The splitting of the sea will take place in next week's portion. And then the week after, we're going to have the revelation at Mount Sinai. God's going to give us the 10 Commandments. We are all familiar with the 10 Commandments. The whole world is familiar with the 10 Commandments. These are the commandments that come from the divine. But what we're less focused on, and we shouldn't be less focused on, is the portion that immediately follows the revelation at Sinai, and that's the portion of the civil laws. That portion opens with a letter Vav. Instead of it opening, and those that understand Hebrew will follow me and I'll explain it in English. It opens, it should have said, Eila ha-mishpatim, these are the civil laws, asher tasim, that I'm placing before them. It opens instead, Ve'ela, and these are the civil laws. Those of you that went to elementary school or high school will remember the capital rule that we were taught. You don't start a sentence with the word and. Teachers didn't like it. They always gave you a -2 or a -5 if you started a sentence with the word and. And is something that belongs in the middle of a sentence. You don't start a sentence. Now, what if you started a paragraph with the word and? They really wouldn't like it. What if you started with your entire essay with the word and? They wouldn't like it. What if you started your book with the word and? We're starting the portion, a new portion in the Torah, with the word and. And these are the civil laws. So the obvious question on the author on God is, God, you're going to get a -2. How could you start a portion with the word and? It should start with these. These are the civil laws. What does it mean, and these are the civil laws? Rashi, the classic commentator, immediately asks this question. Why does the portion begin with the Vav? Even in Hebrew, it's a no-no. You don't start with the word and. And Rashi says that Vav, what that really does, the and, what does an and do? It connects you to what came before. It's an immediate connection. So even though you look at this and you say it's its own portion, says Rashi, no, it's not. It's and. What is it doing? It's connecting to you to what came before. Sinai, just like the revelation took place at Sinai. Also, these civil laws are delivered to the Jewish people at Sinai from God. That's the connection. Don't make the mistake to believe these are such sanctity because they're the 10 Commandments, and these are not as important because they're governing behavior between man and man. Says the commentator, no, that's why that Vav, that and, is there to tell you these are just as important as the 10 Commandments. The civil laws that governs how we're going to live together because they're divine. God wrote this civil code for us. And therefore they have the holiness of the 10 Commandments. So there's two really general principles that we need to keep in mind when we discuss the civil laws. Number one, They are as important as the Ten Commandments. They are as divine as the Ten Commandments. They are the details of the Torah. It reminds me, in the 1960s, there was this architect, his name was Arnie Jacobson, and he designed a new college campus in Oxford. He was so into the architectural design of every single part of this building, every detail. And then what they were dumbfounded about was that he gave in his plans not only how the kitchen should look, but what every pot should look like, what every dish should look like. He got into every single detail, and they asked him, I understand an architect is going to design, but are you already picking out the color of the dishes and the design of the dishes? And his answer was, God is in the details. It's one thing to create the big picture, but it's the details that we're going to deal with every single day. And that's why we can't make the mistake that God is involved just in that which appears to be the holy, but the mundane he leaves to us. No, he's involved in the mundane as well. It's as important to God as the following of the Ten Commandments. The greatness of Judaism is not simply in its noble vision of a free, just, and compassionate society, but how it brings that vision down to earth in detailed legislation. So if I simply did these nice poetic lines, be charitable. Sounds great, right? Be charitable. But if I don't explain in details, what does that mean? Or let's use an example, be a mensch. Well, everyone's going to define that in their own way. God is in the details means that he's going to define for us what he wants as far as being charitable. There is the legislation of charity in the Torah. Unlike in our society where charity is left to you, the Torah will actually legislate kindness. You have to tithe, you have to leave fruit in your field for the poor to come in, you have to take care of the homeless. It legislates it. Why? Because it's as holy as the Ten Commandments. Very, very detailed. The second principle, no less fundamental, is that civil law should not be confused with the word secular law. Civil law is not secular. Civil law is also holy. If it comes from God, it's holy. In ancient Israel, the temple was built on the Temple Mount. Immediately next to the temple was the Supreme Court. The court, the Sanhedrin. Why? Because the detailed law is as important as the Holy Temple as well. So when the Torah says, do not oppress a stranger because you yourself know what it feels like to be a stranger because you were strangers in Egypt, that's not secular law. That's religious law. Every aspect of the civil code of the Torah is religious, holy law as well. So when God said, we spoke about this a little bit last week, when God chose Abraham and he told Abraham what he wants from him, to bring blessings to all the families on the face of the earth. And last week we spoke about that verse where God is telling the audience what he loves so much about Abraham. And he says, because he will show his children, he will teach his children to practice kindness and justice. When we're talking about justice in Judaism, it is justice that flows that which comes from God. Because as I mentioned last week, that word justice can be very, very corrupt. Justice doesn't mean that's what the Justice Department of your society deems as just. Because if you're in a corrupt society, that justice is not just. And Hitler, Yamach Shemai, giving out orders that the law of the land was to wipe out every single Jew is not just because it was the law of the land. So civil code can be evil as well, depending who's writing the civil code. But civil code can also be holy if that civil code is coming from God. The Jewish civil code are part of the 613 mitzvot. That makes it sanctified. That makes it holy. So now we've covered 2 of the 3 categories of the commandments that we have. The third is called hukim. Chukim means statutes. What is statutes? Laws without a given reason. Decrees by God Almighty. God says, this is what I want you to do. And the verse doesn't continue like in other places, so that you'll remember that I created the world, so that you'll remember that I took you out of Egypt. There's no continuation. This is what I want you to do. That's the way it's presented to you. There are numerous laws in the Torah that are presented to the Jewish people, given to us by Moses as a chok, a decree. This is what God is asking. I'll give you the classic example of a chok, but because this class is really what we're focusing on in the book of Deuteronomy is the mitzvah of kosher, that's going to be the main focus of what we're going to talk about in the weeks to come. The Torah does not give us a reason for kosher. That we can come up with benefits to it, absolutely, we'll discuss them. But don't mistake kosher to be a law with a reason. It was never given to us to a reason. It was told to us. It was told that this is the diet that I want you to keep. Now, can we each try to come up with benefits for it? We will. We'll go through that exercise. And nothing you're going to say is going to be wrong so long as you don't say, and that's the reason God told us to keep kosher. You can say after observation of thousands of years, this is how we have benefited from the laws of kosher. That any one of us can observe and see. But the Torah itself presents it to us as a law without a reason. What is the classic example of a chok in the Torah? It's called para aduma. Has anyone ever heard the words para aduma? Para aduma is the red heifer. What's the red heifer all about? Well, we've discussed numerous times that in the Torah there's laws of purity and impurity, not to be confused with dirty. Purity and impurity is a spiritual impurity. It's not evil, it's not bad, but it's a state of being. So one that is in a room with a dead body is spiritually impure. That means they don't walk from a mortuary into the holy temple. They have to wait a period of time, they have to immerse in a mikveh, and then they're back into a state of spiritual purity. Being in a room with a dead body is not anything bad. Families say goodbye to their loved ones and they're in the room with someone that they just said farewell to is not bad. Doctors in the room with those that passed away are not doing anything bad. People involved in the Chevra Kadisha are doing one of the greatest mitzvot that we have is to care for the dead. People going to a funeral is doing a great mitzvah. So don't confuse spiritual impurity with the word bad. They're not connected. It's a spiritual state of being that one needs to immerse and then come back into a state of tahara. Part of the process of the purification process of going from a state of impurity to purity was the sprinkling of the water of the para aduma. The Torah will tell you. The Torah tells us in the portion called by the name chukas that you need to have a perfectly red heifer. Perfectly red heifer. No exception to any of its hair. Perfectly red. That red heifer is then slaughtered as an offering to God. And its ashes, after it's offered on the altar, is then mixed with a particular purified water, and that concoction that's made from the ashes of the red heifer and the particular water from a spring is mixed together, and that now is sprinkled on the one that's impure, and they become pure from it. Anyone make any sense of it? Any reason why if the cow is red it works and if the cow is black and white it doesn't work? Any idea why we need to have ashes at all in part of this process? The Torah doesn't give us any reason for it. I'm not going to give you any reason for it because I haven't figured it out. But it's there. The red heifer, by the way, we're still waiting to find the next perfect red heifer. There's only been, I believe, 9 in history, waiting to find the 10th. There's always these claims that they found it in some farm and they're raising it in some farm and it has to remain perfectly red. When we know that we have a red heifer, you can rest assured Mashiach is right around the corner because we're going to need that water from the red heifer to purify all of us because we're all in that state of spiritual impurity right now because none of us have been sprinkled with the waters of a red heifer for thousands of years. So when Mashiach comes, there has to be a red heifer somewhere alive in the world in order to help us out. So again, farmers are always claiming that they have one because it'll be worth millions and millions of dollars. You may want to decide to go into the farming business and raise some cows and see if you have luck in getting a red heifer. Another example, do you know in the Torah that you can't, in making a garment, mix wool and linen together in the same garment? It's called shatnez. So much so that there's places called the shatnez laboratory. If you buy a new suit or a new dress, you bring it to them for them to tell you if this has wool and linen mixed together. Because the Torah says you can't mix wool and linen together. Why? Doesn't tell you. Now, have there been scholars that have tried to define reasons for this? Absolutely, but they're not trying to tell you what God had in mind. They're trying to tell you from their observation, what could this possibly be? I've heard the wool and linen, that one represents death, one represents life. We don't mix life and death together. These are all just observations. The Torah itself does not give any reason. So, to deny yourself a cheeseburger, why would the Torah say this food is good, this food is no good, this food in combination with lettuce and tomatoes is okay, but if you take that burger and you put the slice of cheese on it, no good anymore. Even if the cheese is 100% kosher and the burger is 100% kosher, you can't put it together. You're going to say, oh, because kosher, because that came from an animal that didn't chew its cud and have split hooves. So now you think you understand it? So if an animal doesn't have split hooves but chews its cud, now you understand why you can't eat from it, but if its hooves are split, now it makes sense to you. So again, we can give you everything the Torah tells us about it, that this is the signs of a kosher animal, but what I can't give you is the why of it, because the Torah didn't give that to me. Observations, we're going to talk about the observations. What were the benefits of the Jewish people keeping kosher? We will eventually talk about that. But when we talk about it, it's under the category in the Torah called hukim. We clearly see that there are certain mitzvot that do not make sense to the human mind. Try as you will, you'll never find the rational reason for these mitzvos. Laws, statutes, decrees. This is the way God presents it to us. In every person, there are two levels. There's a level of intellect. You think through something and you make a decision because your intellect leads you to a decision. But there's something else called will. Will. You want something. They're not the same. It's wonderful when intellect and will work together hand in hand, but it doesn't always happen. You might think that since a person is basically an intelligent being, that will and intellect will always agree. Because we're intelligent human beings, and intelligence will dictate our will. But it's not always so. You think that you always want what makes sense, but how many things do you want that you really cannot give me a rational explanation why you want it? Not everything makes intellectual sense to you. Some things are just desire. In fact, intellectually, you know that it's not good for you. You know that. And yet, if you're honest with yourself, you'll say, but I want it. Now, what will win that battle between will and intellect? Each of us face that battle every single day. As I admitted last week, I face that battle with Mountain Dew every single day. Intellect tells me it's not good for me for a lot of reasons. Will tells me I want it. Oh, do I miss it? And it's a battle. Every time I go to a store and they have the refrigerator, it's loaded with the Mountain Dews. I face that struggle. I've been good so far for a nice long period of time, but I can't promise you anything about tomorrow. One day at a time. Now, I'm using a silly example of Mountain Dew, but you each have your Mountain Dews in life. You each have those areas that your intellect tells you one way, but your will tells you something else. And who's going to win that battle? It's a constant. People go out on a date. Right? They're going out on their first or second date, and their parents are trying to convince their son or their daughter, he's not for you, she's not for you, right? And what does he or she say? But I love him, but I love her. And they're saying, it doesn't make sense, it's not a good match, you're this and that. Will. It's very hard to fight will. It's not an intellectual conversation. Love often is not an intellectual conversation. Attraction makes no sense intellectually, but I'm attracted to them. What does that mean? Attraction is more in the will department. It triggers something in desire, and it's not left for intellect to explain. It's just there. It's like one of those things where you say, you understand. That we get between us, that we each have this things that we desire that we cannot put into words. Intellect is something that you can explain in words. Will is something that's higher than intellect, and you generally have a hard time explaining to it. The Kabbalah teaches us that there is a level of godly revelation which can be understood rationally. That's intellect. He explains it to us, and we understand it. But then there's a level of God that transcends intellect. That's above our intellect. And we could never understand it. We were not given the intellectual knowledge, the intellectual level to grasp that aspect of God. That's more God's will. And God's will is above our intellect. That which he decided to share with us that's within our intellectual rational, absolutely, he'll explain it to us. That which is above is left in this category of chukim. So those mitzvot that are mishpatim, the civil laws, we can make a rational explanation for every civil law of the Torah. In fact, so much so that many governments for thousands of years have studied the Jewish civil code and have enacted them as part of the law of their land because it intellectually makes sense. We've spoken here a great deal of time how the founding fathers were experts in the Talmud. Why they wanted to study the Jewish civil code and the details found in the Talmud before forming a constitution and forming the United States of America. Because this was a code that has worked for thousands of years and had intellectual, it made sense. All the testimonial laws in the Torah make sense. As I told you, you're testifying through a ritual. And as I said last week, the ritual is the vehicle that brings the message from point A to point B, from generation 1 to generation 2. I can intellectually explain that to you. The hukim category, the decree category, I can't do that with. All I can say to you is, it's God's will. And just like I can't define in words to you my will, I definitely can't define to you why God wants something. But he does. That's what he asked us for. To connect to God on a higher level where you're connecting to God above our intellect and just doing something because it's God's will. Imagine a mom trying to tell her 3-year-old child why he needs to eat vegetables. Okay? We've had these conversations either with our own mother or with our own child or with our own grandchild. Growing up, spinach was easy for my mother. Popeye. You watch the Popeye cartoon and okay, that's why you would eat spinach. Mothers would have to find reasons to explain why you should eat a vegetable that you didn't want to eat, but they would have to define it on a 3-year-old level. It's good for you, it'll make you strong, it'll make you happy, you'll get extra dessert if you do it. But they would have to give, but they're not going to, with a 3-year-old, start talking about the vitamins found in broccoli. 3-year-olds won't grasp that. So it's on that level, on the 3-year-old level, where that conversation will take place. Then there are certain things that parents don't even try to explain because it's just too complicated, it's too lofty, and they're not going to be able to get it through to a 3-year-old. And when the child says, but why do I have to? The parent says, because I'm your mother. Right? Because what does that mean, because I'm your mother?
Because I told you.
Because I told you, I'm not entering this conversation with you. I'm not arguing with you. I'm your mother. And it's usually followed by, when you become a mother, you'll understand. And then when that little girl grows up to become a mother and you hear her saying to her 3-year-old child, because I'm your mother, and God's been hearing us do this for thousands of years, because I'm your mother. Does that mean I'm your dictator? It sounds that way to the 3-year-old child. But that's not really what the mom is saying. The mom is saying, I know this is what's best for you, but I also know I can't explain it to you because you won't understand, because you're 3 years old. Now, the gap between a mother and a 3-year-old is a finite gap. It's just a matter of time. The gap between God and a creation of God, a human being, is infinite. So just like a mother can justify saying to a child, because I'm your mother, God can justify saying to us creations of His, trust me, I'm your God, I'm your creator, and I know this is good for you, but you're not going to understand at this level, you're not going to understand the reason. So I'm asking you, I'm your God. Do it because I'm asking. That's a higher level of our relationship with God. Those mitzvot that we call hukim are on that level. That there was no way God could condense the reasons or rationality behind them so that the human mind could be able to grasp it. Now there are beliefs that when Mashiach will come, and it will come soon, that our intellect will be on a higher level, and we'll be able to then grasp the understanding of all of these laws that we did not understand all this period of time. So we'll wait for Mashiach to come and see if that teaching is actually accurate, if we suddenly understand the red heifer, and we understand shatnez, and we understand kosher, if we have a better understanding of it. But now in our current situation, there is no way with our finite intellect that we can grasp the true understanding of why God gave us these commandments. When you say, I'm doing this mitzvah because I enjoy doing it, or because it makes me feel good, or because it makes sense to me, or because I like it, that's one level of serving God. But a higher level of serving God is, I'm doing it because I'm a Jew and God asked me to do it. Because God said He wants me to do it. Not that I enjoy it. Not that I understand the reason for it. In fact, it may be difficult for me. It's a struggle for me. But I do it nevertheless. Because you're my God. That's a far loftier level than, of course I love doing it. It makes so much sense to me. It feels so good. It makes me happy. Most Jews like Simchas Torah. Hey, it's a party. We're going to dance. We're going to drink. We're going to have a good time. And it makes sense. We're celebrating our Jewish pride. That's not a hard one to sell. Kosher is a lot more difficult to sell. Go kosher your home, that's sacrifice. Give up foods that you like, that's sacrifice. Give up restaurants that you enjoy, that's sacrifice. Buy glatt kosher meat at a higher price than what you get at Ralph's, that's sacrifice. Separating milk and meat, that's sacrifice. Having to buy new dishes because you decide to go kosher, that's sacrifice. Are you enjoying this? If I'm going to be honest, no. I'm doing it because God asked me to do it. That's commitment. That's a relationship. That's the strength of the relationship. Another way of looking at it, we're all different. Every one of us in this room, we're made up differently. And if we would do some type of IQ test, we would all score different grades because in some areas we're better than others, in some areas the other is better than us. We're all different when it comes to our intellect. Let's suppose I asked you all to take out a document that I prepared for you to study. And you each studied that document. Some would understand it more, some would understand it less. Let's say it was a document on medicine. If you were a doctor, you would have a far better grasp of what this document was about than if you weren't a doctor. If you were a nurse, you would have a far better understanding than if you're not a nurse. Whatever that subject may be, some of you may be more inclined to understand it more than others. So when it comes to that which we're studying together, we're each going to grasp it differently. But what if we were just asked to do something which made no rational sense? If I was to ask you to raise your right arm, then raise your left arm, like Simon says, and do this and do this. Exercises that we each can do equally. We're all doing exactly the same thing. When it comes to these mitzvot that are hukim, that we do just because God said, there's no difference between us. We're all doing it not because of any inner intellectual thought process. We're doing it because we're servants of God, and God asks us to do it, and we believe that God loves us and will only ask us to do things that He loves. So when we do practice the hukim, we're all on the exact same level, equal with each other in its performance. The purpose, perhaps, of the hukim is to teach us that human understanding is not a prerequisite for doing that which is right. In Judaism, there's a right and there's a wrong, but they're defined by what God says is right and what God says is wrong. As we mentioned before, left to human rational, there's nothing absolute. The human beings that want to write a human code, it's going to be subject to what they feel at that time, what they decide is right or wrong. And that changes with society, and that changes with the dictator that's writing the rights and wrongs for their period of society. A God-written morality remains the same all throughout history. It's like the laws of nature. The laws of nature are completely unaffected by human understanding or lack of understanding. Meaning, gravity will cause someone to fall, whether he understands what gravity is or he has no idea what gravity is. You're gonna fall. It's not affected by our understanding. God's laws that's presented to the Torah, if we try to understand it, if we do understand it, it's not affected by our grasp of it, of our understanding. It's there because that's the laws of nature, so to say. It's what God built into the world and what God wants us to practice. On the subject of kosher, I doubt this, that there's anyone in this room that was born to a Jewish family that can go back 4 generations and tell me that all 4 of those generations did not keep kosher. I doubt such a person exists. Which means at some point, either your parents or your grandparents or your great-grandparents, somewhere along the line, there was kosher. It existed in your family tree. Because if you go too far back and you don't have it, chances are you assimilate out of Jewish existence. Kosher is one of those things that have kept the Jewish identity. It's very hard to go 4 generations without Jewish identity and remain Jewish. And so if you're the 4th generation, start thinking about bringing it back in some type of capacity. And we'll talk about that as we go along with this. It's not an all or nothing. We can start in certain types of ways to introduce kosher into our homes, to introduce kosher into our families. We can start with small baby steps, but in some type of way it should be part of our existence, part of our life. I want to tell you about Charlie from Chicago. For a number of years, Charlie was attending a Torah study class similar to this, but taking place in Chicago at also a Jewish institute that was there. And he primarily came because he loved the intellectual stimulation of the class. He wasn't religious, wasn't from an observant home, but he appreciated the intellectual stimulation of studying together, and he loved it. And he would go every single week, but never motivated to do anything about what was being discussed. So he learned about the Torah, he learned about the mitzvot, but it didn't cross the line other than it was enjoyable to study, but it never became part of practice. One day, he's chatting with the rabbi of the institute, and the subject of commitment comes up. That means at some point are you going to take something that you have studied and commit to it? And Charlie says, it's actually been on my mind for some time now. I've been going for years and years and years to your class. And I know that it hasn't changed me. I have enjoyed it, But I haven't done anything different in my life because of the classes, and that has been on my mind. It's been weighing on my mind. And now that you're talking about commitment, I'm going to make that commitment. And I'm going to pick a hard one. I'm going to start with a hard one. Usually people start with the easy ones. I'm going to start with the hard one. I have decided that starting tomorrow, I'm going to keep kosher. That's a big one. Starting tomorrow, I'm going to keep kosher. And he didn't say, like, starting tomorrow, I'm going to experiment with kosher. I'm going to start by looking at products in the supermarket and see if it has that OU sign or the OK sign or some other kosher symbol. Or I'm going to start going to a kosher pizza store instead of the non-kosher pizza. He just said, I'm going completely kosher, which is a shocker. It's very hard to go from completely non-kosher to completely kosher overnight. But that's what Charlie committed to. So the rabbi is hearing Charlie make this commitment, and he has just one question, and he feels close enough to Charlie to ask him the question. He says, number one, I'm totally impressed that you've made this decision to go from non-kosher to kosher. I'm just curious, when you said that starting tomorrow you're going to keep kosher, why not just start now? What's the difference between starting this tomorrow morning? If you're going to do it, then it's just a few hours. Say, I'm going to start now. He picked up on that word tomorrow and wanted a better understanding of where is tomorrow coming from. Is tomorrow a figurative word, meaning not tomorrow, actually tomorrow morning, but tomorrow of my life, sometime soon? But if you mean tomorrow, like tomorrow morning when your alarm clock rings, then and dinner tonight can't be kosher? So he asked him. And Charlie said, don't push me now. Tomorrow means tomorrow, and it doesn't mean today, and just leave it there. So, okay, I'll back off. I'll take it. Tomorrow sounds great. Okay. Now, why indeed did Charlie not want to start today, but tomorrow? It's like this. Before going cold turkey, he wanted to go one more time to his favorite eating places. In Chicago, there's a store called Superdog. Superdog is similar to here in LA. There's that Pink's hot dog place in La Brea where everyone goes to get their hot dogs. Not everyone, I can't say everyone, but it's famous for everyone. You can sometimes, the yeshiva was not far from there. You would see a line blocks long waiting to get their Pink's hot dog. Superdog is that hot dog place in Chicago that the people that are addicted to hot dogs love going to Superdog. Charlie's this is his favorite dinner, was going to Superdog. And if he's going to go kosher, and Superdog is not a kosher environment, he needed to say goodbye to his hot dog. That's what he was thinking. He didn't say this to the rabbi because he didn't think the rabbi would understand. He didn't want the rabbi to think he was absolutely crazy, but that was his reason. He needed to go one more time to Superdog. They were famous for their hot dogs, for their shakes, and for their fries. And he makes his way for his last time going to Superdog. He sits down and he orders one with all of the sauerkraut and all the relishes that you can possibly have, one of the long ones. And he's sitting down and you can actually see this relationship with the man and his hot dog. I mean, he's relishing every bite, every moment. He's in a different place. And suddenly this guy sits down, because he's seeing Charlie and his hot dog all alone. So he sits down by his table and he starts chatting with him. And the two realize that they actually have children that attend the same school. And they begin a conversation. And the fellow says, Charlie, you look like you really like that hot dog. And he says, oh yeah, this is the very best. But this is my last one. Your last one? Why? If you love it so much, why is it your last one? Now, he doesn't have the courage yet within him to say, because I'm going kosher. He doesn't want to have this discussion with some stranger. He's going to laugh at him. He's going to make fun of him. What are you going to do that for? And he wouldn't even have a rational explanation as to why he's going to go kosher. So he had to think fast as to why is he going to tell this person this is his last hot dog. So he goes the easy route. And he says, I'm unemployed. And I have to make some budget cuts. So the first thing I'm giving up is dining out. And the fellow says, that's so sad. That's so sad that you would have to give up something that means so much to you. But today is your lucky day, because I'm the owner of Superdog. And he takes out of his wallet and he hands a card to Charlie. The card reads, this card entitles the bearer to a lifetime supply of Superdog. So I've given this to a few of my friends that they can go into any Superdog they can get any time. I'm giving it to you, Charlie. A man that loves his Superdog and appreciates the quality of my Superdog as much as you should not have to sacrifice it because of budget cuts. He doesn't want to dig himself into any deeper, and I'll say, well, I really lied. So he thanks him. It's so sweet of you, so kind of you. Thank you very much. He finishes his Superdog, and where does he go? He goes right back to the rabbi, and he's very angry. He's very angry. And he says, God is cruel to me. That was cruel. All I asked for was a few extra hours. That's all I asked for. You asked me why, and I told you I'd just give me a few extra hours. That's all I wanted. I went to my Superdog place to say goodbye to my favorite dinner, and that's what he has to do to me? Put this card in front of me now, so now every day I have to struggle and face this challenge? He's very upset. He's very upset. He feels that God was teasing him. So the rabbi said, you think that what you just encountered was a mountain that you cannot climb. You think now that every day you're going to face this struggle, and every day you're going to look at this card, and every day you're going to be tempted. The truth is, you just have to walk around the side of the mountain, and you'll see that there's an elevator there waiting to take you straight to the top, enabling you to go higher than you can ever have thought possible. And he explained himself. This was not God playing with you. This was God showing you how much he loves you, and how much he trusts in you, and how confident he is in you that you can make it. And he's showing you just how strong you really are. That this happened to you just hours before your commitment is to take place, indeed is God. God played a role in this encounter. But it's not to tease you. It's to show you how strong you really are. Charlie kept his commitment, and in time, this mitzvah led to another mitzvah, followed by another and another. Today, Charlie keeps a Shabbat dinner. He invites many guests into his beautiful home, and every guest that goes to his home looks for one particular piece of art that hangs in Charlie's dining room. It's a huge frame piece. It's all empty. There's nothing there, but in the center is this little card that Charlie received in Superdog that says free lifetime supply of Superdog. And everyone will ask Charlie, what's this piece of art doing in your dining room? And his answer, it's my constant reminder of how much God believes in me. Every mitzvah we do is part of a relationship. It's direct. It's, we're going to talk about because your grandparents will have so much nachas in heaven seeing you do this, and your great-grandmother, all that is true. But it's really about a relationship between us and God. And when God gives us a mitzvah, and he says, I'm not even going to explain to you why. I'm just going to tell you, I want you to do this. I want you to trust in me. And he sees us doing it, then that relationship is strengthened. And that's what we want to have in life, is a strengthened relationship with God. All times of day, all times of year. And so as we get into our discussion of kosher, or more of also an understanding, I promised you last week that I'm going to get into why we do mitzvot in general. I want you to keep these things in mind. You don't have to be on the Charlie level of doing it all overnight. We can talk about small, slow steps, baby steps, to bring us into that closer relationship and bringing some of these mitzvot and introducing them into our lives, because it's really been part of our family tree. It's been part of our family tree for thousands and thousands of years. Maybe it took a break for a generation or two or three, but it's time it comes back.